I didn't ask how to say your last name, Alex.
Sanfilippo.
Sanfilippo. All right. Hey, I'm Ed Parcaut, your host of Inner Edison, and today we are talking with Alex Sanfilippo. That's it?
That's it.
Can you say my last name? I was like, Parcaut. That's all right. I won't test
Okay.
you. All right. So anyway, the reason I do Inner Edison is I found that our greatest accomplishments come from our greatest defeats. And what I want people to get out of my podcast is that it's okay to go through that. And then also have people on who can help them build their business or build their brand, whatever, or, anything that can help them grow. So, Alex, I know a little bit about you, but my listeners don't. So can you just give me a little background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. So first off, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to be here to share. I'm a fan of your podcast. You do great work here. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So yeah, a little bit about me. My background is actually primarily I did some real estate before the economy crashed in 2007. Shows you my age a little bit there. And after that, I actually got into aerospace. The aerospace industry seemed to be one that wasn't crashing from that in 2007. So I'm like, this looks good. I'll go there. I did 15 years in the aerospace industry, and during that time, toward the tail end, the company I was with that was private, went public. And at that time, I kind of realized I wanted to transition out. And then so I started some entrepreneurial things, including a podcast, and now some software companies as well. And that's kind of been my journey, is I've just really enjoyed doing that along the way. I've had a lot of side hustles along the way and just had a lot of fun with it, but that's what I do.
Well, I was going to say 15 years. You just don't look old enough to do that for 15 years. Sorry. It must be the fact that you live in Florida and all that humidity helps you stay young.
That's it.
Yeah. I look younger when I don't have all those whiskers, but so how did you get into, all right, so a lot of people, and I say a lot, there's been a lot of podcasts started, right? And a lot of times they say a lot of podcasts are started and then they stop after like the 10th episode. They don't do it anymore because they realize how much work it is and how expensive it is to do it right and edit it right. So you want to kind of get into what your companies are now and how you help entrepreneurs?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so first off, when I got into podcasting, it was out of a place of passion. Like I wanted to be a podcaster. And as soon as I started, I realized that like you're saying, it was a lot harder than people made it out to be. Like the people on the other side are like, oh, it's pretty easy. You just do this, this, and this. And then I was like, oh, shoot, I need a lot. Like, it's a lot of work. Like this is like another job. It's a labor of love is what I call it. So thank you for your show again. But I realized like I really enjoyed it, and thankfully I made it past the 10 episode mark. I'm now over 100 episodes, and my show has grown really well. I'm very happy with it, and that kind of gave me access to a lot of stages at that point. So I've been able to speak at all the major podcasting conferences, in person and virtual. And by doing that, I just realized, you know what? I'm passionate about this industry. Like I love this industry. What can I do to serve these individuals? And I realized one of the big problems reasons people stop is because finding guests is tough. I shouldn't say finding guests. It's finding ideal guests. Like we all have a cousin or a mom or someone that'll come on the show, but finding someone that's the right fit for the audience that you're serving can be difficult. So I decided to build the software around that. And for lack of a better terminology, like I'm not the technical founder. I have a co-founder who's that side of it. It's just like an online dating app, but instead of connecting people for dates, it connects podcast guests and hosts for ideal interviews. It uses an algorithm to do that, and we've just kind of perfected that over time. We've been doing that for a while now, and it's really helping and serving a lot of people.
All right. So basically, if I needed a guest, then I would log on to your service. You want to go through the process real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Or real long. I don't mean to. I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm just trying to say you don't have to go so far in depth on how you created it.
Oh no. I can summarize it pretty good. Again, if you ask my co-founder, the technical guy, you might get a 4-hour response with that open-ended question, Ed. So
that's like my kids would tell me, Dad, just tell me what time it is, not how to make the clock.
Well said. I like that. Your kids are smart. So basically, you just decide from the homepage, are you a guest or a host, and then you build your profile based off that. It's a pretty extensive process, if you will. Like it asks a lot of questions because it's going to create a really nice profile for your podcast, or on the guest side, a one sheet as we call it. So it'll have like your images, your bios, your links, like everything is already built into both sides of these things. And then from there, the system will automatically basically look at everything that you presented on there and do some calculations that I don't quite understand. There's about 38 different pieces of matching criteria that it'll go through the algorithm, and then it spits out what it considers to be matches. And some of them are going to be fantastic and others might not be, but that's the whole idea. You can match with somebody or pass, and you can message within the platform. So if you're like, oh, I found Ed, he looks amazing, he's got a great experience, I can hit message, we can chat back and forth before committing to anything. But yeah, that's the whole process there. So the whole thing is just we'll show you matches, and you decide if it's a good fit after doing some conversation, then you can have an interview.
Because I mean, it is difficult to get the right people for your podcast. I've been lucky. I've had some people help me get the right, some guests on here who will give the benefit. Because you can have like you said, you can get anybody on there, but in order to drive your podcast and get more listeners for what people are coming, it is difficult to find those people. I get lucky because I go to Steve Sims' little speakeasy every so often, and I run into a bunch of people. And that's, you were talking before the show about Tucker Max. He was speaking at one of the events, and I asked him if he could come on, and they're actually going to help me do my book. And then when he started telling me about how, David Goggins, and he broke down how much he made by self-publishing, which put those numbers out there, which normally most these people won't do that. They don't. And he was just telling everything, and it was such a great episode. And then, there hasn't been let's put this, any of the bad episodes, you would never know because they never made it on.
Right. Hey, man. And that's something some people won't do because they're like, oh, I put in all this work, I got to let it out. If it doesn't serve your audience, don't do it. Like, it is not worth it. And that goes beyond podcasting. That's anything in business, right? Like, even if you put time and energy into it, if it does not serve somebody, don't do it. It's just not worth it.
Right, because then it hurts you. You're going to lose a listener. You're going to lose that. All right. So that's the podcasting stuff. Any advice you'd want to give somebody who's thinking about starting a podcast along? Because I think it's important, if you have the time and the energy and the drive, to have it connected to your business somehow to help build more listeners, build more stuff. What do you recommend to people who are thinking about starting it?
Yeah. So if someone's starting to think about starting a podcast, first off, it gives you access that you just can't get. Like, you talk about Tucker Max, like, Ed, that episode was like fire, like so good. Like, I'll go back and re-listen to it. I liked it that much. Like, and I encourage everyone listening to go back and check out that episode with Tucker Max. But you wouldn't have had access to him necessarily if you didn't have somewhere to bring him, right?
Right.
So here's another example. I had somebody on my show recently, and he was a tax expert. And I do that once a year. I try to bring on someone to talk about taxes. It's kind of boring, but entrepreneurs need to hear it. So I always look for someone somewhat interesting. Well, I found this guy, and he was brilliant. And we just chatted for an hour total, like including the episode. And I told a friend, like, you should reach out to this guy, like, after I got off the call. So I sent him his website. He went on. Turns out this guy charges $1,000 an hour to talk to him. So my buddy's like, oh, I guess I can't talk to him. I'm like, man, I learned a lot, not just with my podcast, but also asking him questions after done recording. Like, I had that access because I have a podcast. So I know I'm kind of going a long-winded answer here, but that's a great reason to have a show. If for the very least it's for you to have access to people that you would otherwise not have access to, that's a good reason to have it. So if you have like a newer business or you're doing coaching, it's a great way for you, again, get that access and even find potential clients that way. So I think that having a show is really important. And the other thing is, it just adds a level of know, like, and trust. Those three things: know, like, and trust to whatever it is that you're doing. People like to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And just social media isn't really doing that anymore. It's kind of one-dimensional, right? But if someone can hear you talk for 30 minutes or whatever it is, 25 is probably better. But if you can hear you talking and sharing, they can really decide, okay, I think I like this person. Like, Ed seems like a cool guy, and he's sharing transparently. I think I can trust him. I think I want to do business with this person, right? Or maybe they'll even recommend it. Be like, you got to hear this episode. Now, that's kind of like an organic way to spread your name that I think is just really beneficial.
Yeah. And I think so too, because I got lucky because I started in, radio 3 years ago. I got asked to start a radio show. My first question was, people still listen to radio, right? Because to me, it was a dying place. But it was allowed me to learn how to talk on the radio and talk about stuff, and they were live. And so you got used to just talking, and now it's just, you have to get to a point where you just don't care. And I don't mean you don't care about how good your episode is, that you just don't care if you make a mistake. You don't care if you mispronounce somebody's last name. You just apologize and keep going on. Nobody wants a perfect episode, so you can't edit all the little stuff out. I do not like when I'm watching a video and then I see it, right? Because they edit it. Yeah. And it's like, what did you take out? I want to know what you took out. I don't care about how clean it is. What did you take out? You just made me think about what you took out. That's all I care about.
Man, that's so true. No, that's a good point. And here's the thing, like last year, I don't always want to talk pandemic. Like it happened, so I'll just reference it. But last year proved to us that people want to feel like connected to other humans, right? And so by you not taking out the word like that I just said, or the that's going to come up at some point, by not taking that out, that's a human conversation. That happens in real life. And here's the thing, if people want to listen to a super curated podcast, they're not going to listen to yours anyway. I'm not trying to be mean, but they're not going to listen to mine either. They're going to go listen to the NPRs or the Wanderies that have a team of 100 people producing an episode, right? Like that is truly a production versus just a natural conversation. People want this more than ever, and that should give all of us permission to say, you know what? Sure, like if I sneezed during the episode and it's super loud. Yeah, I guess I could take that out, but the rest of it leave in because people are looking for something that is a true conversation they can grab onto.
Right. And I remember when I was live on the radio, and because now you're not, you have to record ahead of time and they edit it and they put it on. But when I was live, it's like, during the break, I'm leaving that in, even if we have to record, and they're like, because then people think it's live, when you leave those mistakes in because you can't fix them. And that's, but I don't want to get too far off on the subject. Maybe people don't want to know about the podcast and all the, but I'm just saying I actually really enjoy interviewing people. And it's my curiosity about what you do and how come. And then I find, I'd say probably 80% of the people I interview, I will do business with them or in the not right now, but in the future, something they do, I've learned so much more about them and how it can help me as a business owner and also a podcaster and all the other stuff I do, that it's very important. So I feel lucky when I get to talk to somebody like yourself and get to know this knowledge that I wouldn't normally get to know, or I'd have to, like you just say, paid for to get that same knowledge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you. The other thing that I think it does, and again, we'll get off this topic. I can
no, well, that's fine. We're good.
So,
We're good.
But something that I think is really important to think about as well, like all friendship is based on a meaningful interaction. And recording a podcast episode together, for most people, unless they've just done like 1,000 of them, it's a meaningful transaction of time, right? So like you automatically kind of have that level that of like trust with somebody already that you can actually build, again, a friendship or you can build a connection with. And so for me, like it's always like that. Like if I'm a guest on a show, like I don't do this all the time necessarily. So now I'm like, man, I had a cool experience with Ed. Like that's someone I could be friends with. Like I'll know that after the episode.
Right. And I've actually, done business, it's anything you do, you're trying to help people. And I'm not looking to build my book of business, not looking at, it's really getting to know somebody. That's my whole key here. That's why I'm here. I'm very curious. I want to know what you do. How can it help me build my podcast? How can it help one of my listeners build whatever they want? Because what we're talking about right now, even though it's just a podcast, we're talking about creating a brand.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what so really the episode's about creating a brand. We're just talking about podcasts and how you creating a brand for yourself through a podcast right now. We'll get more in depth to how you're part of how you do help people create brands in a minute. But I just think it's very important to do something like this, right? It could be lives on Facebook and YouTube if you don't want to do a podcast, if you don't have the time to edit it. It could be on TikTok live or Instagram live, just something to get that information out there so people know who you are. Because one of the things I heard about 2 years ago is I was the best kept secret. And you don't want to be the best kept secret.
Right. Yeah. I've never heard that said. That's well said. I like that.
Yeah. And you don't want to be that. You want people to know who you are, what you can do. I've been doing mortgages for 20 some years and I do a really good job. We help people build personal wealth through home ownership. And that's our goal, what we do. And we do stuff better than anybody else, but people just don't know that unless it's word of mouth from somebody else, because we don't tell people that we did so-and-so's loan, right? Because that's what we can't do. We have fiduciary responsibility not to let that information out. They have to tell. So it takes a lot longer to build a brand that way. But if you use a podcast, I use, radio show, I use lives, I use other things to get that word out there.
Yeah.
And that's, go ahead, Hunter.
No, I completely agree with you. I think that it's smart. They're like diversifying that even a little bit is important to see kind of where your audience is, who resonates with you.
Right. And then also, when you're building, where people, credibility, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, right? In this, people know what you're talking about. I have people call me all the time, ask me questions and say, I knew you would know, right?
That's nice.
Yeah. And it's because you have to. And when you're doing podcasts and you're interviewing people, this is the different thing. I never find out everything about my guests. I want to be curious and ask questions and get along the way so my listeners can understand the way I'm finding out. I don't want you to tell say, hey, I had so-and-so and I know his story. He does creating a brand and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to do that. I want you to explain who you are, have an interview and actually enjoy that process and find the thing that in you that I catch during the show that's important to you and then key in on that.
Yeah. I respect that about what you're doing, because I think that it makes a more organic conversation. Like if you already had 30 questions planned out that you're going to ask me exactly, like that's more of a transaction back and forth than a true conversation. And people are getting more and more savvy, even listening to podcasts. Like people can tell the difference. Like not because you're not like a quick reader necessarily. People can tell was that natural or was that just something that was pre-planned and predetermined. And so I think the way that you're doing it is a very smart way.
Well, I try. And I don't know if it's perfect, but it's my way.
It's
All
working.
right. Yeah, thanks. All right. Anything else you want to add about podcasts before you can tell us how to create a brand?
I mean, I could talk about podcasting for days, so let's just not.
Well, we put some like 14 minutes into it. I think we can move on to something else.
Yeah,
I do have one question. Since you've been doing this, is there a right time period that you should do your podcast? Like, should only be 15 minutes, 30 minutes? I mean, I know Joe Rogan, and my problem with Joe Rogan is I can't watch an episode for 3 hours, right?
No, me neither. And Joe Rogan's the exception to every rule. Like, no one should try to do that. So there was a report done by a company called Convince and Convert, sorry. And they did like a study to see what podcast listeners say about podcasts. They did a poll with, I think it was 1,000 people, and 55% of people who listen to podcasts say that the episodes are too long. So they said that they're too long. So for whatever that means, right? Like, try cutting it down a little bit. So for me, my episodes, they used to be about 55 minutes, and I cut it down to about between 30 and 40. It just kind of ranges because it just depends on how the conversation's going. And I saw a huge tick in the amount of people who are actually completing listening to episodes, which you can look on most analytics of who's actually hosting your podcast. So that was an eye-opener for me. So I think that that's something to consider. Like, try to keep it as short as you can. I know if I'm about to listen to a new show that I haven't listened to before, I'll scroll for a minute and I'll decide to listen to the shortest episode usually just to start. So that might say something as well.
Yeah. The why. The first episode. Why are you doing your podcast?
Right.
All right. Well,
35 seconds. Let's do it.
Alex, it's been nice having you on today. All right. All right. So that's good to know, because most of mine, I've been saying I want to keep them around 30 minutes. Sometimes I go 35. Sometimes, depending on the conversation and how intense, I think even Tucker Max was 45. You know what I mean? And so I had one other one that was 53, but on average, I would love to keep them 30 minutes or less.
Yeah. I always say, how long should an episode be? And as long as it's good, I think is the right answer.
There you go. All right. You want to get into your other thing that you do after you take your drink?
Let's do it.
All right. So you want to explain to us how to create a brand? What's the best way?
Yeah, sure. So that's the name of my podcast. It's called Creating a Brand. And for a little bit, this was actually probably my biggest entrepreneurial failure, I'd say, aside from having some real estate investments in 2007. But that's beside the point. But hold on, the real estate investments in 2000, you could have kept them. They would have been just great right now. So. Yeah. Oh yeah. I still actually have one of them, and I'm tempted to. Anyway, nope.
Because you can listen to my real estate jerky stuff, and you'll know this is not 2008, and we are not going to see a bullet bubble at all.
Good to know. I'm going to go listen to that podcast. That's great.
Yeah. So
okay. Anyway, so when I first started the podcast, Creating a Brand, I had this grand idea of building like a community alongside it, because I was doing coaching at that time and helping people understand how to build their businesses. And this was from my experience in aerospace. And I was like, you know what? I want to leave aerospace. So this will be a side hustle that I'll turn into full time. And it won't just be coaching. It'll also be this online community that's a paid, closed community. And man, I did that for too long, probably 6 months, which doesn't sound like a long time, but when something's not working, like, you have to just draw a line in the sand and just admit it and call it a failure. So I spent a lot of money that I didn't need to spend building up the infrastructure of this, devoting time to courses, a lot of the weekends, a lot of free time, and just never saw anything with it. And it's because I just didn't know what the market wanted. And man, that was tough. Like, the podcast continued going, the podcast was continuously growing, but like the solution, I'm doing air quotes there, that I was offering to people isn't what they wanted. They liked the show and they didn't want anything else with it. So like, for a long time, I struggled with it. Like, the content of the show is great, and I think it's just gotten better and better. But what I was doing on the side wasn't working to try to turn it into an actual profitable business. And it was interesting because my coaching was going great. Like, I was helping people actually figure out how to do things. But for myself, I really felt like this is probably the one time I really dealt with imposter syndrome, because I'm like, man, I'm helping these people, but I can't help myself. Like, what is going on here? And man, it was a serious struggle when I got started, but it really taught me a lot and led me to launching PodMatch, the service I now have. I was able to kind of figure out like what I actually needed to do. But yeah, so creating a brand is something that I'm not even taking on coaching clients right now. Like, I'm fully focused on 2 software startups, PodMatch, and then another one for podcasters as well that I'm doing. But yeah, like it's been the show, and it's been something that's been very fruitful aside from the initial like really, really big letdown that cost me a lot of money and time.
That's an experience. That's excuse me. That's your Inner Edison moment there. Right.
Yes, it is. And at the time, I didn't really realize it. So
yeah, we all have to go through those to figure out stuff. We have people on that, if you don't struggle, you don't learn. So, all right. So you talked about PodMatch. What's the other one you were working on?
So it's called Podcast SOP, and SOP just stands for Standard Operating Procedures. So the idea is to help a podcast host who is just struggling with keeping up with all the things you do every time you release an episode and actually keeping that organized. So it's like a checklist project management system.
And how long has that been going?
That is currently in alpha testing. So we've got 100 people testing it right now. And as soon as we finish evaluating their feedback, we'll get it out to launch to everybody.
Okay. Well, it sounds like, so basically that helps you schedule, set up all the stuff that you would normally have to do.
Yep.
What's the full process? So if somebody's never done it and they're thinking about utilizing it, what does it do?
Yeah. So basically, again, you're actually going to say, hey, here's a new episode. You'll hit new episode button and it'll populate a list that you create or use a template that shows everything like find my guest, record with my guest, edit if I need to. Create social media post, like all these different things, whatever it is that people make. I usually find on average, it looks like people have about between 25 and 30 different things on their list. And every time you make a new episode, it's a new checklist that gets produced. You can assign team members, you can add due dates and things like that. You can have links to it. You can add your documentation on how to do it. The whole idea is just, can we help people stay organized? Because a lot of new podcasters, they keep all that in their head, which that's how I started. And every time I'm like, oh, shoot, I forgot to do this. Oh, no, I forgot that. Or like, uh-oh, I know I'm forgetting something. So the idea is, can we help people not do that anymore?
I still do it in my head, but even though they put it on the calendar, I still do it in my head. So
Nice.
Yeah. I just one of those people who remember everything. That's why I was divorced twice.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that.
No, it's funny. I was laughing at your SOP that you had to explain to people what SOP standing for, because I was prior military. Yeah.
Yep.
So all right. So your PodMatch is doing really well, right?
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Yeah. Because I've seen that before. I saw you today when I was seeing you come on. I was checking. I've seen that out there, PodMatch, before. And so I was like, that sounds very interesting, because like we talked before, finding guests are very difficult. Finding good guests are very difficult. Finding any guest is easy.
Yeah.
So
thankfully, you and I had Steve Sims introduce us, so that helps a lot.
Right. And so he is my PodMatch.
Yeah, right. He's on PodMatch, so that's great.
Is he?
Yeah. Yep.
He does say he is a podcast slut. He goes on anybody's podcast.
He calls himself that. You're right. He will.
Yeah. He even went on this not high. Yeah, I think she was younger than high school's podcast, just to be on there. Because she asked him. Yeah, of course, I'll be on there. Sure. So all right, sounds like we've talked a lot about podcasting today.
Yeah,
which is something that's important to me, because what I do, right? I do podcasting and a radio show and all the other stuff. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. It's important to have the right information if you're going to do this, because it is difficult to keep doing this after so many episodes and keep going, and then finding new things and making sure it works for your audience. What else? I mean, because what else do you want to talk about today? Because we talked about your PodMatch, we talked about your new thing that you're really not pushing it out there because it's in beta.
Yeah. Well, I think what's important to kind of understand here is not just podcasting, but like in general, like I found an area that I was passionate about. Like I wanted to get out of a 9-to-5 job. I found an area I was passionate about and totally missed the mark on it. Right. Like I did the wrong business, and I had to like be humble and like get back up and do something.
Before you keep going. All right. So what did you do what were you doing that was wrong? That you said this was the wrong, all right, you were passionate about, but it was the wrong thing. What was that? What were you doing? Because it wasn't coaching.
Yeah.
Right?
So coaching was working. It was me trying to take that online to a private community with courses. And that works for some people. I'm just not the guy for it. And I think I looked at some bigger names out there. I was like, I could do that. And so
you set up courses under, what was the courses?
So I had courses.
I'm not trying to kick a dead horse here. I'm not trying to make it, let me rub you in the, some certain salt in that wound. I'm just saying, I want to kind of understand what didn't work.
Yeah. So a lot of them were around. So again, like creating a brand was the whole idea. So it was like how to do that with podcasting, how to do that with social media, how to position yourself properly. So a lot of self-development stuff. And they were all courses on that. And I put time and energy into it. And it just didn't click. And maybe I just had the wrong mind for it. But I think what it was is I think I just missed the mark on what the people that I was serving were looking for. Like the same group of people I marketed PodMatch to, and that took off. I just didn't understand like who I was actually serving, I think.
Maybe it was too early.
I mean, possibly.
What I'm saying is because you weren't known well yet,
Yeah.
where you are more well known now. And if you could do this, because I'm not saying to go back in it, because I know you, but I'm just saying maybe you were too new at it, where people didn't know who you were and they didn't understand the expertise you had, and that the knowledge that you had would work for them because you were unknown at the time. Are you following me here?
Yeah.
That'd be like if Steve Sims did it now, everybody jump on it and buy it all day long, right?
Of course.
And maybe you're at the point now where it would work now, right?
Yeah.
Because of your other services. Okay, this is our PodMatch. This is the other thing we're doing. All right, if you want to learn more about each of this, how to do this, this is our episodes we do. Here's $9.95 for subscription. Watch all the different episodes for what you're going to do. Because there's a big push for that right now. And I think you now are at a point where it would work.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to push you back into it. I'm just saying I just think you were too soon. Not that you wasted time. It was educational. You learned how to do a course. You learned how to put it together. Because those are things I'm looking at doing now for my industry, right? When people are looking to buy a house, everybody asks the same questions all the time, pretty much, right? So I could do a whole course on first-time home buyers. This is what you need to know, and go through the whole process so they understand all these questions ahead of time and go through the process. I can sell that. I could sell that now, but if I was 1 year in the business, I couldn't. So follow me here.
Yeah,
I just think you were too soon. You didn't miss the mark. You were just too early.
Yeah, and you're probably right. And again, that goes back to like maybe even my self-awareness of where I was at that time. I think if I really look back, I looked at bigger names that had arrived, I'm doing air quotes there, but they're in their 10th year, and I was comparing their year 10 to my year 1 and assuming, I can just do all the things like they are too. And it was flawed thinking on my part. But like you're saying, like I probably could do better now. But I don't look at it as like a total failure, because like you're saying, I learned a lot from that. Like I know how to tell somebody like, hey, here's a great website you can use to build courses. Here's a good format that seems to work better. Like people actually engage with it better. Like those are things I now know. So I don't look at it as like, man, I wasted all that time. But I do say that, you know what, like I definitely didn't start with the right thing. And I agree with you.
No, I just think you were too soon. Yeah. I mean, and I still think you could utilize all that now for where you're at now, because and there's nothing wrong with what other people are doing, and you need to mimic certain things other people are doing that are successful. Still, everybody, even Steve says, still everything I have, take it all. I don't care. Make it your own. I'm here for you. That's what I'm here. So take everything. And that's basically, what you should do. I'm not telling you to start this thing back up, but I'm just saying relook at it. And then maybe there's parts of it that you can utilize now going forward and say, okay, all right, you guys are all, here's my community now you created, PodMatch. And the other thing, you now have a community that could actually benefit for it more. And then maybe there's different things now that you've learned to create those episodes.
Yeah. Going back to like Edison, because I'm going to steal the name of your podcast here. I mean, he didn't start over every time he had to reinvent, right? Like he just built off of what he already had and found ways to tweak and adjust until something finally worked. So you're absolutely right with that. I mean, I think that's great wisdom for anybody that feels like they've failed. Instead of just feeling like a failure, just think of like what you can use it for as a stepping stone, instead of just being like, oh, woe is me, I'm done, right? Like see what you can actually do with it. I think that's a lot of great wisdom there. Yeah,
our greatest accomplishments come out of our greatest failures. And 100%. I keep saying that because that's Edison. And I mean, he learned 999 times how not to make a light bulb. And then there was that one time that it worked. Because if he would have quit, and that's what one of the quotes for him is the fact that people usually quit right before they're going to be successful. And they just give up, and you can't give up. And that's important to learn from all the way through your phases. Use that in what you've learned for future, because you will utilize it again. And sometimes you're going to do things that's a little earlier than you should, because you just don't know any better. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. That's been true for my life. And I'm probably a bit of an early adapter. Like I implement things maybe sooner than a lot of people do. Not everything, but some things. So yeah, I definitely be one of those people, but I think what you're sharing is great wisdom, again, because it's not something we should stop doing. We should continue trying and just be self-aware to see like, okay, am I in the right place and frame to be able to do this the way I think I should?
And you also got to look back at when you started that. I mean, podcasting, how long was it around at that time?
A few years ago. Not like podcasting has been around for 20 years, so it wasn't 20 years ago.
I know, but 20 years. When were that on cassette tapes? 20 years ago?
I don't even know. That's a good question, actually.
Because I mean, it's like, how did you listen to it 20 years ago? Because I've been around since I started. I remember the first computers I knew about. They had floppy drives, so I don't even know how you could do.
I'm about 6 years into podcasting, so I still think I was pretty early actually compared to a lot of people.
And I'm only a year into it, so
yeah. And you have a phenomenal show, man. I know I already said that, but it's so good.
I'm just I want to give out good quality content and help people build whatever they're trying to do, right? As a business owner, understand, or even if you're just still working for somebody, and just make sure that you just understand things. I just want to help people, and that's why I'm here. So, and I think people understand that. What is your reason to be in podcasting? Is it to, be the next Joe Rogan? Well, I don't want to be the next Joe Rogan. I'm sorry. That's not my goal. I don't want to have that many people like what I do. I'm actually surprised how many people listen to me, right? Because that's just like I think you said about imposter syndrome and all, sometimes you're just like, I just, I guess that we have knowledge that we need to help people with, right? We have it, and we've had these things happen to us. People want to know that because it's going to happen to them. And, in years ago, we would hide all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. You don't serve anybody by not sharing something and you don't know who needs it. Like at the end of the day, like everything that I share on the internet, I just consider to be a test. Like podcast, blog, whatever it might be on social media, it's all just like a practice for me, just something that I get out there and do. Cause I'm like, if this can serve one person, even though it's not perfect, then I owe it to them to get it out there on their behalf. So, I share that mentality with you. And because of that, I think having that mindset, like that mindset of a giver, like I think that people are really attracted to that. And that's another reason my show has grown as well.
I appreciate you being on today.
Yeah, man, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah. I guess you're leaving then, huh? Already? I'm just kidding.
No,
hey, we're at your perfect mark, according to you. Anything else you want to add? Because regarding this, our topic today for our listeners, anything that you wanted, a little wisdom, last little thing?
Yeah, I think that something that's important to remember is that it's a Helen Keller quote, and she says, "Alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much." Think about what it is that you can do to contribute and add value to the world, and don't think so much about your success and your failures as much as what am I doing that can help and serve people. And I find that when you lead with that value, then you can make profit as a result of that instead of vice versa, as many people think. So just think about like, hey, what can I do together with other people to really serve them, to come alongside them? And that's been something that's just really helped me reframe my mindset about who I am and where I'm going. And it's served me well, and I trust it'll do the same for everybody listening.
Well, I don't want to add to that because I don't want to take away from that. No, I mean, it's important because, I always tell my kids, leave wherever you are better than you found it.
That's so good.
Whatever that is. It's important to do that. And I think, and a lot of people are getting into the stuff for the wrong reasons. I want to make money from this. I quit my job. I'm going to be a podcaster and make money. People aren't going to listen to you. They want you to just give. And then as you give, things will come. And that's, it works at any industry that you're in.
Yeah, 100%, man. I couldn't agree more with you on that.
Alex, thanks so much for being on here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I had a blast. Thank you.
All right. So stay right there. All right. I want to thank everybody for listening today and listening to Alex's journey. And again, remember, we're here every Tuesday. So I appreciate you listening to our show. Alex, thank you so much.